So we go till 10 till. Okay. So go to Luke chapter 16. That will be our study this morning. And just to make sure that we get through everything, we'll just kind of do it as a lecture format. And then at the end, if we have time, then if that's okay, we'll open it up for anyone that might have a comment. When it comes to this story, the rich man and Lazarus, I have about 3 or 4 different lessons on the rich man and Lazarus. And so I say that just to say that in any time that we address this, we don't address every single, or at least I don't address every single thing from every single angle that you might address it at. And so there may be some things, well, why didn't you cover that? Well, that's in another lesson that I use that or maybe address that. Because this morning, what I really want to do, and the majority of this thought really is on just making some general observations about the text, and there'll be some application there as well. But the majority of the lesson is, if I had been this rich man, what might I be thinking in his position now in eternity? And to think of what he might be thinking then, and then to be able to come back and say, okay, well, I don't want to be where he is at, having those same kind of thoughts in my mind for eternity. What changes do I need to make on this side of eternity so that doesn't happen? So that's kind of the crux of the lesson. But as I said, we'll have some observations about the text, because I just can't read a text and not make some observations about what we see and what we read in that text. So go to Luke chapter 16. And we'll begin by reading this passage. Now, there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen, joyously living in splendor every day. And a poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores and longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table. Besides, even the dogs were coming and licking his sores. Now, the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. And now he's being comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great chasm fixed, so that those who wish to come over from here to you will not be able, and that none may cross over from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, that you send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, in order that he may warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. But he said, No, Father Abraham. But if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to them, If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead. I want to draw some contrast, because you cannot read this passage of Scripture and not be impressed with the fact that we obviously have a passage of contrast, a passage where we've got men who in their life on earth were contrast. They were completely different individuals. Their life was completely different. And what is interesting is then in eternity, the contrasts continue. Though the result and the environment and the quality of their life has definitely flipped and changed, but you still have these contrasts. One of the things that's interesting as you think about this is that when you look at this passage, we are just told that it's the rich man. We're not given a name to this man. The name that we're given of the 2 characters in this story is the beggar, is the poor man. And that's fascinating to me because when it comes to those in that society and the environment in which the rich man would have lived and the community in which the rich man would have lived and Lazarus would have lived, whose name do you think was known in that community? It wouldn't have been the beggars. And yet what's interesting about this, at least in my mind, is it's almost as if Jesus is trying to get us to see that when things are looked at from God's perspective, things that impress us don't impress God. And so as everyone knew the name of the rich man and knew where the rich man lived and knew his family and they knew his name, because every town has a name that has the concept of wealth with it. If you were in Richmond, it's kind of an odd name, but in Richmond, Hockenmeyer is the name. Oh, well, the Hockenmeyers or the Vandevers. These are individuals who are wealthy farmers and so if you say Hockenmeyer or Vandever, well, people are, oh yeah, well, you're talking money there. Those names carry the idea of money. You think about it in our nation, Rockefeller, was always kind of I'm no Rockefeller, someone would say. Meaning, I'm not, made of money. Names carry with it, the concept of wealth. And so I would imagine that in the community in which this rich man lived, his name carried the idea of that's wealth, that's success. That's what success looks like. But as God looked at him, he's just a man that was rich. God saw the beggar and knew the beggar's name. To make some more observations about that, it's interesting for us to think about this concept of knowing names and how personal that is. How personal is it to know the name? I mentioned earlier that one of the things that I do is I've driven a school bus for our district for the past 18, 19 years. And one of the things that I always do, and now I'm at a point where I bounce around to different routes because I've driven several of them, and so they just send me whichever one. I have one main bus that I drive, but I bounce around to a bunch of other different buses. But in every bus that I've ever driven, I learned the names of every one of my kids. I wanted them to know that I know their name. And when they get on the bus, it's good morning. It's not good morning, y'all. It's good morning, so-and-so. Good morning. So I say good morning to every single one of every single student that gets on the bus. One of the things that we have in Richmond is we have a lot of low-income housing, evidently, or obviously in Richmond. Unfortunately, I guess that would be the word that I really need to use. And so a lot of these kids come from very difficult and tragic circumstances. And so it's a shame to think that the one secure thing that they have in their life is the one guy that's picking them up every morning and the one guy that's taking them home every afternoon. And that guy knows their name. So I want them to know that they're valued and that I value them, and I show that I value them by knowing their name. And I don't let them call me bus driver. And every time they say bus driver, I was like, there's nobody here named bus driver is my response. Or sometimes I'll say, what do you need, bus rider? And then they'll grin, Mr. Bailey, yes, what can I do for you? Our relationship is going to be on a first name basis because that's what names do. Names imply personal knowledge and personal relationship and care and concern and love. And the scriptures talk about this as well. And there's a great comfort in the fact that when we read in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 19, nevertheless, the firm foundation of God stands, having this seal, the Lord knows those who are his. And everyone who names the name of the Lord is to abstain from wickedness. I struggle to remember all of your names. Can you imagine our Heavenly Father knowing every single person who has ever walked on the face of this earth, who has walked in a faithful manner of life and have served him, God knows their name. God doesn't know the area of Newton or the area of Charlotte or the area of North Carolina or the area of the United States, the people who have walked, who are his. He knows, well, I've got some people over there. He knows the names of the people in the United States, in the state of North Carolina, in the city of Newton, on the street of, in the house of. He knows their name. That's how personal a relationship is. That's encouraging to me, that I know that my God knows me and knows my name. In Revelation chapter 20 and verse 15, this is really brought out when it says, and if anyone's what is not found written in the book of life? Area, state, nation, country, time in which they live? No. If anyone's name is not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. My name is in God's book, preventing me from being lost forever, identifying me as one of his. God knows my name. The rich man also knew Lazarus' name. That's interesting to me. Go back to Luke chapter 16. As we think about, trying to, I don't know why you would, but trying to make some excuses maybe for the rich man or try to give some justification as to, why he didn't do anything for Lazarus or why he didn't help him or maybe he never saw him or maybe he wasn't aware of him or maybe he just didn't see that individual or go out that gate where Lazarus happened to be laying. And yet what's interesting about that is that when the rich man requests assistance, he doesn't request assistance from that beggar dude that used to lay at my gate. He requests assistance from Lazarus. He names him. And in actuality, by naming Lazarus, what he actually did, it proves that the rich man had chosen not to help him. And that he couldn't plead ignorance. He actually incriminated himself in the process of requesting for assistance and then naming the man. Oh, Lazarus, you know him, you knew him, and you did nothing to help his situation. Even the rich man knew this man's name. It's interesting to me in the parallel of what each man desired, what Lazarus desired when he was on the earth, and what the rich man is asking for here. Lazarus simply desired what? Not a pie, not a full 7-course meal, not even a complete biscuit. He said, I'll just take the crumbs. And isn't it ironic that when the rich man makes request of Lazarus, what does he request? Not a gallon of water, not a glass of water, a drop. And yet, just as Lazarus did not receive his desire, crumbs from the rich man's table, the rich man doesn't receive his desire, a drop. Even though this request and what's asked for is so small, it's not going to happen. And so it's ironic that you have this same kind of, if you will, parallel. In Deuteronomy chapter 15, the law had said, if there is a poor man with you and one of your brothers in any of your towns in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart nor close your hand from your poor brother. But you shall freely open your hand to him and shall generously lend him sufficient for his need and whatever he lacks. This man, this rich man, had completely failed. Lazarus wasn't asking to be supported for the rest of his life. Lazarus wasn't even asking for a full meal. What Lazarus would have been happy with would have been sufficient for him, and he would have been satisfied with was merely the crumbs. But the rich man couldn't even be bothered by that, by just giving him the crumbs. Solomon said, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. And then, of course, in 1 John chapter 3, in verse 17, but whoever has the world's goods, well, that was a rich man, and sees his brother in need, well, he's got him by name. Lazarus over there is in need. I know his name. I know who he is, and closes his heart against him. How does the love of God abide in him? But there are some other contrasts that can be made from this text. If you go back to Luke chapter 16, one of the other contrasts that's made in these gentlemen is the fact that the rich man, it says that he fared sumptuously every day, but that he was quite independent. I mean, he had whatever he needed and beyond what he needed. He was able to live a gracious, sumptuous, rich life. He was completely independent. But how did Lazarus get to where Lazarus would get to? How did he get around? It says that he was laid. He was dependent upon others to get to where he needed to go. The rich man can go and do whatever he wanted, but Lazarus had to be brought and had to be laid and had to depend upon others to get him where he needed to go. And then it's not surprising, the greatest and the most obvious contrast in this context is the fact that when Abraham says, look, you had your good things, Lazarus had his bad things. You were dressed in purple and you had joyous living, but Lazarus was covered in sores, longing to be fed. In fact, the dogs came and licked them. And then what's interesting is that we find some interesting contrast at the death of these two individuals. We find that the rich man has said that he died and was buried. I wonder what that funeral would have looked like when he died and was buried. I wonder how many would have come to if we put it in the terms of our culture, would have come to the visitation. I wonder how many would have come to the funeral. I wonder how long the lines would have been. I wonder if he would have laid in state for a while for people to come by and see the casket. I wonder what kind of a festivity this must have been. He died and was buried. But the interesting thing to me about that is that the rich man's glory and luxury and larger than life lifestyle, what happened? That's as far as it went. He died and was buried. And for him, the blessings and the joyous living stopped when he died. And so the last hoorah, if you will, of the rich man was his funeral. But what's interesting about Lazarus is it says that he died and was carried. Lazarus could not wait to get out of this life, to a life of comfort, to a life of ease. He could not wait to get through the journey here on earth and to get past the curtain of death and into the Hadean realm of eternity. And so we have two very different, you might say, perspectives that maybe the Lord is trying to get us to see. Do you want to die and be buried? Well, that was it. That's where your life was at. Your life was always about here. Your life was always about making sure that you were successful here. And so your whole focus was upon here and now. And so your last hoorah is your funeral. Or do you want to die and then be carried to the greatness and the joy of living? Do you want your joy of living to be here on this earth? And then that is buried with you? Or do you want the joy of your living to be as it was for Lazarus And that is you die, but you're carried to a better life. Just some quick observations. One of the things that I would suggest to us, and for some reason I think I've talked to individuals and they have this assumption, don't assume that your joy will continue after death. I don't know that the rich man ever thought that things would ever be different for him. Don't ever assume that comfort and pleasure or anguish and pain. In Luke chapter 6, and verse 20, Luke's account of the Sermon on the Mount, and turning his gaze toward his disciples, he began to say, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you and insult you and scorn your name as evil for the sake of the Son of Man. Be glad in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way their fathers used to treat the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. And woe to you who are well fed now, for you shall be hungry. And woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for their fathers used to treat the prophets in the same way." Don't get so enamored with your condition right now and assume that that condition will always be. And so Jesus looks at his disciples and say, look, your condition now may be one of hungering and weeping and men hating you and your name being scorned, but look at what that condition will work for you. And if you're on the other side of that and you're rich and you're well fed and you're laughing now and men speak well of you, don't think that condition's always going to be that way, because your day is coming too, but your day is not going to be the day of those who serve the Lord faithfully. And so we just simply ask the question, are my good things earthbound? The rich man's were. He died, was buried. Lazarus' good things were just beginning. Do I get caught up in this world and the good things of this world and forget that the really and the truly good things are yet to be, are yet to come? Instruct those who are rich, Paul says to Timothy, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Just think about the rich man. He did everything that Paul said not to do in verse 17 and did none of the things that Paul said do in verse 18. He was a complete failure in the exhortation that Paul is giving to Timothy. Don't be like that. Instead, he says, verse 9, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is life indeed. That's what Lazarus was carried to. But the treasure of the rich man was buried with him. He did not receive that. You can look at Matthew chapter 6 and verses 1 through 2 and 5 and 16 and see what the Lord says about this matter. But I want to move on. Finally, we see that you have them in torment, the rich man, and you have Lazarus being comforted. The observations that I would make about this is your destiny is determined by you. And to me, that's the point that Abraham is making to the rich man. When the rich man makes his request and says, Father Abraham, send Lazarus over here. I'm tormented. This is terrible over here. Have him dip his finger in water and I'll just take a drop of that. And Abraham says, child, don't you remember that during your life, and it seems as though that the point that Abraham is making them is, don't you remember that during your life you had your good things? You've had your moment of comfort. And the choices that you made, you're now paying for. You're now suffering the consequences of that. Child, don't you remember? You're here because of your choices that you made when you were walking on the earth. I would suggest to you that it's the same lesson. It's a lesson that I think the Lord teaches quite often in the matter of preparing for eternity. It's the same idea that he teaches in the parable of the unrighteous steward. And I know some people read that parable and they're just almost offended at the fact that the Lord would use the man that was unscrupulous and did illegal things. But the point of the parable is, here's a man who took what he had at his disposal and used it to make sure that when he was put out of this position, he was going to be taken care of. He was planning for his future. Now, Jesus uses that, and even his master was impressed with the way that this unrighteous steward was able to secure for himself a future, or at least a living, when he was fired from his position. And this is the point that Jesus is making in this parable. And he says in verse 9, I say to you, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of unrighteousness. Now, all that Jesus does is he uses the terminology of the parable, and he uses it, to me, in an accommodative sense to bring that over into the lesson. What did the steward, the unrighteous steward, do? He made friends with his master's debtors so that now they owe him one. Hey, I cut your debt, you owe me one. Hey, I cut your debt, you owe me one. And so he made friends by his actions so that when he was fired, now he could call in those favors. And Jesus says, that's what I want you to do. I want you to use the wealth of unrighteousness in such a way that you secure for yourself eternal habitations. I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. He who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much, and he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? Stewardship of money is important just for here on the earth, making sure that we are good stewards of our money and paying our bills, and making sure that we're taking care of our financial obligations, and making sure that we have a retirement, and making sure that we're planning for our future here. Well, let me tell you, brethren, we are an ultimate failure if we do wonderfully in the matter of fulfilling our financial obligations here. We're fantastic when it comes to saving for retirement, but we don't give a lick of thought to what happens eternally. What happens after this life? The rich man made all of those preparations, fantastic at it. He made no preparations for death. And as a result of that, he wasn't prepared. And this is the point that Jesus is making when he says, use what you have here, not to secure more here, but to secure the eternal dwellings. Lay not up treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves can break in and steal, but lay up your treasure in heaven where neither moth nor rust can destroy and thieves cannot break in and steal. Matthew chapter 6, 19 and 20. Fail to learn this, and God calls us a fool. After death, your destiny is final and unchangeable. There was going to be no change in either Lazarus or the rich man. It's final. We'll speak a little bit more about that in just a minute, but it's final. This matter of eternal destruction, when you think about it, is kind of an odd phrase, isn't it? I mean, because we think about something that's destroyed. I mean, how many times do you have to destroy it? Well, it's destroyed. I mean, you destroy something, it's, one time. You watch these videos of tall buildings or stadiums being destroyed. They don't say, okay, well, we're going to bring down this skyscraper, and they destroy the skyscraper. Okay, well, we're going to destroy it again. Well, but no, it's already destroyed. You can't destroy it again. So how do you have eternal destruction? And to me, the idea of eternal destruction, as is mentioned in 2 Thessalonians 1 and verse 9, and is mentioned in our story, is the concept of this sphere, this condition is forever. And the concept of destruction means it's final. You can destroy a building, or you can have an ancient historical landmark be destroyed, and it can be renovated, but it's always with the understanding, and people recognize that's not the original building. The original building was destroyed. It's a renovation. Because once something is destroyed, it's final. There's no going back from that. And so when we think about this matter of eternal destruction, to me, that's the concept. If it's an idea of forever and final. Forever final. There is no change. But I wanted us to think for the time that we've got left. In all of these stories, that one of the things that I tried to do to make it more, to make it more personal to me, and sometimes it's just to try to learn some application, and that is to put myself in the story. What if I was this man? What if I were this person? If that was me, what would I be doing? Or in this case, what would I be thinking? What if I had lived my life as this rich man had? What if I had been very self-sufficient? I had been very successful. I was never in need of anything. And so what if now I wake up one moment after death, and here I am in eternity. Here I am in torment. I've made a request. It's been denied. I've told this is as good as it gets. This is where I spend eternity. What would I think? What would be my thoughts? That if this was my destiny, what would I be thinking? If I were the rich man and trying to put myself in his position, I wonder if I would ask myself the question, why did I value earthly possessions so much? Why did I get so caught up with those things? Suddenly, I wonder, would the bigger house mean as much to me? Would having more land mean as much to me? Well, I got to get that different car, that newer car, that better job. Or I've got to get those clothes, or I've got to get that brand on that clothes, or that name brand, or I've got to get that style. I wonder if the jewelry and the valuable jewelry and the way that I accessorize with it, and the way that I fixate on that, would that be as important? Would the desired standard of living that I want to achieve that I want to be able to live in this neighborhood, and then I want to move to this neighborhood, and I want to be able to know that my standard of living is where I want it to be, is sometimes we get worried about what other people think. And I wonder, as he thought about his house, and he thought about his purple robes, and as he thought about his clothing, and as he thought back to the choices and the decisions that he made on a daily basis that continued his wealth, that kept his wealth coming in, I wonder if he thought back to that and wondered, what did I see in those things, knowing that here's where it has led me? What did I see in them? Why did I think those things were so important? Let me tell you, in living in the land that we live in, we are inundated with materialism and worldliness, and we are inundated with wealth. And sometimes we get so caught up in that, and we get so distracted by these temporary things. And we have a greater temptation living in the land that we live in than third world countries do. I mean, they have their own temptations, and we don't have those temptations. But our struggle is wealth. And we struggle with making sure that our outlook on that and our fixation and our hope, as Paul told Timothy, isn't in the wealth, forgetting about eternity. And that's where the rich man had his fixation. And now that he recognizes that none of that is important any longer, he might look back and think, why did I get so fixated on that? I've already quoted to you Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. You know, in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 7, I love this statement because to me it's a statement about contentment. It's a statement, it's the beginning of a context about how the rich need to conduct themselves. And so it's a context that we really need to spend a lot of time in and make sure that we are not doing what Paul warned Timothy to warn the rich not to do. But I want you to notice that in verse 7, it's an interesting perspective for us to consider. Paul tells Timothy, we need to recognize that we brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. What we have acquired here. And what we've acquired here stays here. And so you can look at that from one or two ways. You can look at that from the standpoint, I've done pretty well for myself. I don't care who you are in this audience. I don't care if you're the school janitor. I don't care if you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You've done well for yourself. Why? Because you came into this world with nothing. So wherever you are, whatever your station in life is, you've done well. You should be thankful. But you also need to understand that while you may have done well for yourself, the well that you have done for yourself stays here. And that's what the rich man failed to grasp. We get distracted by that, and riches become deceitful and deceives us into thinking, no, I'm not that way. No, I don't have that issue. Then why did Jesus say in the parable of the sower in Matthew chapter 13 and verse 22 that the seed that fell along in the cluttered ground, that the seed rose up, the weeds grew up, and the weeds choked out the word, and that the application of that, the person that I have in mind, Jesus says, is a man who gets deceived by his riches, not thinking that his riches are running the show, and yet they are, and riches will eventually choke out any spirituality. Chokes it out. It's found in Matthew, it's found in Mark, found in Luke 8, in all three places of the parable of the sower. Maybe a second possible thought. Maybe the rich man, and like I said, what the rich man might have thought. I can't prove this, so this is kind of a lesson of supposition. But I'm just viewing this from what Adonis Bailey, if he was put in that man's position, what I might think if I was in that position of the rich man. And I think I might think, why was I afraid to make needed changes in my life? There's just some assumptions, obviously, that I have to make. Why was I afraid to make needed changes, though maybe the rich man had been encouraged to do so? I don't know that he was or not, but I know for sure that there are individuals who are in eternity now who absolutely were encouraged to stop making the choices that they're making. If you continue to make those choices that you're making, you are going to find yourself in eternity being lost in torment. And so I know that there are people who have passed through this life, who have crossed the curtain of death, and they're in eternity, and I know that they are there, and they ignored the encouragement of people who said, you need to make changes or you'll be right where they are now. Maybe you had brethren come, spiritually minded brethren come and encourage you, as in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1. Brethren, if anyone is caught in a trespass, you are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness, each one looking to himself, so that you too will not be tempted. Maybe you had brethren come to you, as is stated in James chapter 5, attempting to bring you back, to bring you away from the way of straying from the truth. My brethren, if anyone among you strays from the truth and one turns him back, how do you turn someone back? You go and you tell them you're straying from the truth. You've got to return, brother. Well, maybe you had a brother that came and tried to encourage you, tried to tell you you're stepping away. You're straying from the truth. You're drifting from God. You need to come back. But he ignored the pleading of the brother. Maybe elders went to him and said, as his spiritual leaders, he needed to consider what he was doing, and he refused to listen. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief, for this would be unprofitable for you. Maybe that was you. They came to you and they warned you and they exhorted you and they admonished you and they rebuked you. And they were worried and they grieved over the fact that you would not turn, that you would not come from the truth. You were a grief to them. And because you refused to listen, what did it become for you? Unprofitable. What has it profited you that you refused to listen to the elders of the church, that you refused to listen to brethren who came, that you refused to listen to spiritually minded men who said you are making bad choices and bad decisions? How'd that work for you? Well, we learn from the Hebrew writer, it was unprofitable. So why didn't you make those changes? There's any number of reasons why people, and we won't read all those passages, but there are any number of reasons why people won't make those changes. They think it's strange that you don't run with them in the same flood of dissipation, and they malign you. Well, I know what my friends are going to say if I make changes, or I know I'm going to have to change my friends if I make changes because I've strayed from the truth and I've acquired friendships and relationships. And if I come back to the truth, I'm going to have to give those up. And I don't want that. And if I do give that up, I know what they're going to say and how they're going to react. Maybe it was the possibility of losing family. Maybe it was the possibility of losing my position. When the blind man was healed by Jesus and the religious leaders bring in his parents and they say, well, how did he get his sight back? And his parents said, well, we don't know, ask him. And they said that because they were afraid of being kicked out of the synagogue if they gave an answer. And so what do? Basically, they throw their son under the bus. Go ask him. Let him give a statement and give some consequences to what he states. Maybe there's the possibility of losing money. Maybe, well, there was just never a convenient time. Let me tell you, brethren, in the matter of making changes in your life, let me tell you who holds all of the cards of convenience. The devil does. The devil holds all those cards. And guess what? He doesn't play them. There will never be a time of convenience that is just perfect for me to now make my life right. The devil will make sure that never happens. My influence will probably prevent others from listening to the truth. What is the implication in the statement here of the rich man when he learns that there's nothing that can be done for him, but he says, I have 5 brothers and they need to be warned so that they will not also come to this place of torment? Why does he think and why is he so convinced his brothers will also be with him? I would suggest to you the implication is that they were going to follow the example of their brother who had it all. Boy, we want to be like him. There's some implications, some assumptions, but let's assume that he's the oldest brother. And so he's got these 5 other brothers, and they're looking at him saying, boy, we want to be just like him. We want to live our life just like him. Boy, he had it all. He did it all. Boy, that is living. And maybe the rich man is looking back and recognizing that's how they looked at me. And that's how they honored me. And they're going to make the same choices and the same mistakes that I made and wind up in the same place that I am. And I don't want that. But that was the power of his influence over them. Let me tell you, which would be worse? The physical anguish of torment or the mental anguish of knowing that your influence might lead others to the same place. To his 5 brothers, someone might be able to pose this question: okay, what if your brother was wrong? I think this is a great example of individuals who, when we talk with them, they say, well, if what you're saying is true, and I see what you're saying from the scriptures, but if that's true, if that's the truth, then that means my grandma, who I think was a godly woman, who I think was very honorable, who I looked up to, that means she's lost. It may be. But what if your grandma is where the rich man is and saying, please go back and plead with them, don't follow my example, don't believe the teaching that I believe? What if she is from eternity saying, listen to those who are talking to you about this, don't follow my example? And then the final thing that I would suggest to you, I think I would know what hopelessness feels like. And let's be honest, do any of us really know what hopelessness feels like? You know, we realize that we are sinners at some point in our walk on this earth, and we learn those sins can be forgiven. They can. I can have my sins forgiven. Whatever I've done, yes, that's hope. Realize that we're not walking faithfully. I start with my walk with the Lord, and I learn that I'm not walking as I should, or I get distracted. I get caught up in things, and I realize, whoa, I have drifted. I need to come back. Or maybe someone comes and encourages me. You're right, brother. I've strayed from the truth. And so, can I return? Yes, brother. Repent and pray, and God will forgive you. That's hope. Realize I've strayed from the truth and can repent and be forgiven. You know, we pillow our head, and maybe we're disappointed with our words and our actions, or how we handle the situation, or what we did or failed to do. And so what do? As we go to bed at night, we pillow our head and we say, Lord, please forgive me. That was not right. And please give me the strength to do a better job tomorrow. That's hope. Let me tell you, if we die unprepared and we awaken in torment and our destiny is sealed, there's no hope. There is a great chasm, and there's no going from one side to the other. That's the ultimate hopelessness. Your situation, truly, eternally speaking, is hopeless. You see, that's some of the things that we need to learn from the rich man and Lazarus. Sorry, I didn't give you any time to comment. Thank you for your attention.